Hi everyone, and welcome to Brookfield Zoo's Bringing the Zoo to You. My name is Anne. I'm the lead animal care specialist here at Brookfield Zoo, and today you're going to get to meet our sloth bear pair, Kartik and Hani. They're out today exploring their exhibit and getting some new enrichment, specifically their wobble tree today. So this is Kartik, the big guy looking over here at us, and that's Hani on the far right, climbing up on that log. So our sloth bears here weigh about 300 pounds apiece. They're actually about the same size. Kartik is a bit partially Sri Lankan, so he's of a smaller subspecies, so they're weighing about the same. But they love their enrichment. So we have this wobble tree that Kartik has a bungee cord hanging from it, and we've put some jelly on this enrichment device that is kind of made like a beehive. So we sometimes put honey in it as well. And you hear that sucking noise. So sloth bears are pretty cool in that they're the only bear skulls that are designed to eat bugs as their main protein source. And so they do not have their front incisors as adults. And so they have those long noses, and they close their nostrils, and they suck air through the holes where their incisors should be. And you can hear them sucking up all the different snacks throughout the exhibit, and that's how they do in the wild when they come upon an ant or a termite mound. They use those giant claws to tear it all up. They blow a puff of air and they move the dirt away, and then they suck up about 250,000 ants or termites per day, which is a pretty cool adaptation for sloth bears to have. So this wobble tree that hopefully they're going to start using pretty soon, that we've baited with a lot of peanuts and grapes and some fun items. So several years ago we installed this wobble tree to start to show some of their naturalistic features of pushing and pulling and problem solving and digging. And we actually used a crane to lift a bobcat in here to dig a large hole in the ground, and then we dropped it in, and there's a pivot on the bottom. And so once they start using it, you'll see they push on it and it'll drop things down from the sky. Right now they're checking out several other options that were put out here this morning by the animal care specialists for them to find. They are living together right now during this time of year. So we introduced them a couple months ago, and they'll live together until October or November and hang out. They're pretty bonded pair, although they don't live together off season. This is Hani coming up the front. You can tell it's Hani because she has a much smaller, thinner chest crest. She also has much shaggier hair, and she's much shorter to the ground. So she's a little bit smaller structurally than Kartik. Kartik on the right has a huge white chest crest across his chest, and he is a much larger structurally animal. He has a much longer, more silver snout. So those are some ways that we tell them apart. Obviously they have much different personalities. Hani's 17 years old, so she's a much older bear. Kartik is only 11, so he's in his prime. He's quite agile. He likes to tear things apart and climb. As you see him at the top of this climbing structure, bears spend a lot of time in the trees looking for fruit sources in the wild. And so we actually put fruit up in their trees a lot of times so they can go up there and find them as well. So some things about sloth bears in the wild. They are from India, Bhutan, and Nepal. There's a smaller subspecies on the island of Sri Lanka. And they're smaller because bears in all species that are on smaller land with smaller resources generally are structurally slightly smaller so that they can live off that habitat better than having unlimited space. Mostly insects, like I explained, when they tear up those the ant and termite mounds, and they also eat fruit. They obviously love honey. We also train them here with corn syrup, jelly, peanut butter, and anything sweet. Just like every bear loves honey, so do the sloth bears. We also feed them something called omnivore chow, which is made for bears that eat both meat and fruits and vegetables. And so it's made by Missouri, and they eat that as part of their diet as well to get nutritionally complete. And then we feed them bugs every single day as well. We don't obviously feed termites in a zoo setting, but we do feed them mealworms, giant mealworms, crickets, and several other bugs. They're actually pretty hesitant to try any new bugs that we have that they're not familiar with. They get a little scared and kind of snack at them for a while, so we don't do a lot of novelty bugs. You did see them last week checking out some cicadas, which they found pretty interesting last week. They have several adaptations that make them really good at finding and eating the bugs. Like I explained, the nails, the way they close their nose and that they're missing incisors. A lot of people ask why the sloth bears live at Fragile Kingdom instead of Great Bear Wilderness since they're bears. Part of the reason is that sloth bears are the most nocturnal bears as an adaptation to where they come from in the wild. So they come from India, Bhutan, and Nepal, which are very, very hot climates, and so they're nocturnal because it's too hot to be out during the day. So they sleep during the day in the shade, and they come out at night to find all their food. And so their fur actually has no undercoat to keep them warm. It's actually long to keep them from getting bit by insects or getting sunburn, and also to keep the heat off of them. You can see that hump on Hani's back, that she's got that big puff of fur. And that's for moms, that's how their babies move around with them. So when they have babies, they climb on their back and they hold onto that fur, and that's how they're able to move around. And the males have it as well, so if they're fighting, they have a little bit of room so where they don't get any injuries back there, because they obviously do not carry the cubs. Sloth bear moms are actually known to fight off Bengal tigers to protect their cubs, so they're pretty fierce predators. Speaking of babies, Hani and Kartik actually had a litter of cubs in 2013 here that were named, that was a boy and a girl. And Balu actually lives in Philadelphia, and he actually had a cub there earlier this year. So Hani and Kartik became grandparents again, which is pretty cool. And then their daughter is actually at Capron Park, which is where Hani was born, out there. And so they, so some people also ask, like, why are they called a sloth bear? Are they like a sloth? They're not actually related to sloth, and they're not actually very slow moving. They're actually pretty fast. They're particularly busy, noisy, active, curious animals. And that's why we like them so much. We actually call them monkey bears. They're very dexterous. You can see her picking up this toy right now with her claws. They're very dexterous. They're very intelligent and very destructive. They try and figure things out all the time. And so that's a cool thing. They do spend time in the trees, and they do have those long claws, which is sloth-like. And so out in the wild, there's only about 20,000 remaining in their natural habitat. And so we try and help save their habitat. If you buy Forest Stewart Council paper products and wood products, that's going to help save their habitat. There are a lot of organizations out right now trying to save wild habitats for the sloth bear. Their main predator is actually poaching and using them in the pet care industry. They used to be called the dancing bears, where they would have a muzzle put on there and be forced to dance in the public. And that was a way for the calendar people to make money to support their families, and that's outlawed now, and they no longer use that. But that's, if you saw them, they were named the dancing bears. They're also, that's what Baloo in the Jungle Book is named after a sloth bear. And there are varying accounts that Winnie the Pooh could have been a sloth bear as well. So everybody kind of loves sloth bears, and they're in the industry and popular species. And back to why they're here instead of Great Bear Wilderness is, like I said, they're from a really warm climate. And Great Bear Wilderness is built for North American bears, and so it does not have heat over there, because polar bears and brown bears don't need heat, but sloth bears do. They need a lot of heat. There we go. Now he's going to work it. And so sloth bears need a lot of heat, and Fragile Kingdom is heated for all those smaller animals that live here as well. So our holdings are about 70 degrees inside, and that's what the sloth bears need to survive. And so that's why they actually live here instead of at Great Bear Wilderness. And so you can see how he's pushing on that, and then the fruit and the peanuts are coming down from up top. We have a hammock up there that we can put some produce in. There's a puzzle feeder at the very top. We actually have an enrichment team that built this for us that focuses on naturalistic enrichment throughout the whole zoo. And they actually built this for us, and we can make it harder or easier based on how much the sloth bears are using it. And it actually took us about 2 years to teach the sloth bears how to use it, because they were pretty scared of food falling from the sky on them occasionally. So we actually started out really basic. We put a lot of peanut butter on the pole. We put some oranges and different things that they could see around the outside, so they knew what was coming. And then as they learned to use it more and got less scared of it, we could make it more complicated. We also used to have a lot of stumps and logs around it so they could climb up higher to get a visual inside, so they can try and understand what was happening, and that seemed to really help quite a bit. And so that's kind of how the wobble tree evolved. It's a pretty great enrichment to let them use their strength on something that's built to handle it, and be a way to provide food for them throughout the day where they can find it as they choose to. Do we want to take some questions?
Yeah. So can they swim?
They don't generally swim, so they do have a pool. They like to wade around in the pool. They will bob for different fruit floating on the top, and they'll get their feet wet and splash around for some relief from the heat, but they do not generally swim.
And how long do they live?
They live to be around 17 years of age in the wild and in zoos on average, but they can live into the late 20s, early 30s if you're really lucky and they have a lot of great medical care.
What species of bear are they closest related to?
That's a good question. I mean, they are from Asia, which is near where sun bears are from, or Asiatic black bears. I mean, there are 8 species of bears, and they're have some sort of relatedness. But so I would say sun bears and Asiatic black bears.
Can you remind us again what they eat?
So they eat in the wild. They eat insects. They eat fruit. They eat honey. They eat eggs out of nests. In zoos, they eat an omnivore chow or a bear chow. They eat fruits. They love avocados, steamed sweet potatoes, and then we give them a lot of melons, grapes. We have some seasonal fruit, but they're not. They generally like a pretty consistent diet. We train them with a lot of sweeter things. And then they also get bones twice a week where they actually dig the marrow out and suck the marrow out, and then they get hard-boiled eggs. And then for enrichment stuff, we like to do a lot of frozen fruitsicles. They like yogurt puffs and a timed feeder that's on the roof that can slowly drop food throughout the day. And they love peanuts, they love raisins. That's their main diet.
Can you explain why all of the trees in the exhibit or in the habitat are kind of placed at different angles and are different sizes?
Sure. So the actual live trees in the exhibit are covered in hot wire or hot vine, and that makes them electrical, and that's so the bears do not climb the trees. And so we built this climbing structure within it to give them ability to climb but staying contained within the exhibit, and it's far enough from the walls to not be able to get close enough to the wall in order to climb it very far. But they're different varying sizes so that they can get different grips on them, but some are very sturdy so that they can hold that 300 pounds of body weight without that collapsing. It's sort of a puzzle feature. But we have hot vined any live tree so that they cannot use it as an escape route. And you can see, obviously, we have a moated exhibit. He just threw a rock over that moat. We clean that enrichment out every week or so and bring it back up top for them.
That was a good thing to talk about until it went into the moat. In a lot of these habitats, it looks like there are just rocks that the animals are pushing around. What actually are those?
So our enrichment team has a rotocast machine that builds us naturalistic looking toys. So that ball looks like a rock, and it is different. We give them enrichment items to get naturalistic behaviors that they would do in the wild. Here, we want to keep them mentally stimulated. They're incredibly intelligent. They're very, they're used to digging and tearing things apart for their lifestyle, and so we want to give them things to do that with actively as opposed to destroying the habitat. And so we're trying to give them ways to forage for food. So that rock he just threw over the moat actually had some snacks inside of that he was trying to roll around and get them out of. And so it's a way to use the naturalistic behaviors they would do in the wild while in a zoo setting.
So we don't just give them rocks like they're Charlie Brown.
We don't just give them rocks. We give them, instead of that, it could have been a hot pink boomer ball. It could have been a lot of different things, but we use naturalistic items here that it's something they would find in nature. They could have been rolling a stump around that was smaller. Different things that would keep them active that they would normally do in the wild.
Okay, great. How often do they use the wobble tree?
So they'll use it as often as we load the wobble tree. Look, he knew we were going to ask him about that. So we use it pretty often. We use it more in the summer because they're outside more in the summer. Generally, we use it once or twice a month. Sometimes more frequently, especially during chat season in the summer. They're not out as much in the winter because it's too cold for them, but definitely around once a week right now.
Do they know when they've gotten everything out of it?
They generally will keep trying until things stop falling. They can look up and see that hammock. Like you can see grapes hanging from the hammock right now. We have a long pole device that's designed with a bucket on top to dump it in there, or we'll use a ladder up there, and we try and put them throughout so the bears can see a bit of how much is up there.
Can you remind us again where they're from?
They are from India, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. They're a very seasonal species, and so they're solitary most of the time. And then in June and July, they will come together and find mates. And then all the females give birth between the week of Thanksgiving till the beginning of February. It's about a 90-day gestation. And then you see cubs to start to emerge in the spring. And so they are hot weather climate animals.
Are the cubs born with all that fur?
They're actually not. So they have the chest crest in their skin. So when you see a newborn baby, it's a 1-pound baby, and it's mostly completely naked. It has a little fuzz, and all the skin is gray, and then it has a white chest crest, so you can tell if it's gonna have a big one or a little one, which is distinct to every bear, but also genetic based off the parent's chest crest size. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but we're back, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today for the Bringing the Zoo to You. I hope to see you come out when the zoo's able to open, and you'll be able to see Hani and Kartik out here on exhibit exploring all their enrichment throughout the day. And we hope to see you soon, that you're able to support Brookfield Zoo. We missed you, and we'll see you then.